Hey y'all, and welcome back to episode 27 of Pretending to Be Intellectuals. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing our analysis of the Netflix series Rough Diamonds. It's a crime drama about a Hasidic family involved in Belgium's diamond trade in Antwerp. But before we get into what we found and took away from the show, I think it'd be a good idea to get into why we are interested in covering the show in the first place. Trey, can you explain why we thought this was so important to look into?
Yeah, of course. So, a big overarching reason we thought a show like Rough Diamonds would be interesting and, valuable to take a deep dive into was that it's a show about minorities. I've seen a lot of studies looking at how the effects of the media's portrayal of minority groups can impact or, at least like interact with how we as the audience view that group. So, take for example, there was a study done in 2015 that shows a pretty clear relationship between the amount of exposure to positive portrayals of LGBT people on television and people having more positive attitudes towards them. And in another study conducted by, and I'm sorry if I butchered the first author's last name, Cecil Meeusen and Laura Jacobs, which was interestingly enough looking at Flemish language TV news about minority groups, and the show Rough Diamond's original language is in Flemish. And so this study found that all five groups included were portrayed negatively, like a vast majority of the time. Um, Also relevant to this show, one of these groups was Jews, and the data showed a clear correlation between the amount of positivity or negativity in the media and the positivity or negativity among the audience's perceptions of these groups. So basically, this is all to say that what we watch and see in the media can be a really important factor in what we think about this or that.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. That makes a lot of sense, especially if you just don't have any real world connections with people in this or that group. The media basically will tell us what to think about them. I hear you.
Yeah. There's actually a couple of theories sort of all about that. So, first, we've got the interpersonal contact theory, which basically says that, the more you learn about and have positive interactions with people in, whatever group, the more positively you'll feel about them. Pretty straightforward. Um, on the other hand, like you said, a lot of people only engage with some groups through the media, and this is where the parasocial contact hypothesis comes in. It says that positive media portrayals of a group can help, sort of supplement real world interactions in a way so that the viewer can still form positive attitudes towards them. And just a quick aside, y'all, we're gonna have all sources that we got info from and we're influenced by. We're gonna put that down in the description for y'all to look through. But anyway, going back to why we thought this show in particular was important to look at, um, Hasidim are a minority within a minority. They're Orthodox Jews who follow sort of a broad stream of thought and traditions passed down from previous rabbis like the Baal Shem Tov, also known by his acronym, the Besht, and this sort of, I guess, mode or stream of Judaism originated in Eastern Europe. They're generally pretty easily identifiable by their style. The men are usually wearing black. They have a lot of the groups have these big furry hats that they wear on, Shabbos or other holidays, and they're called shtreimels. And a lot of these groups also have, they're sort of well known for having these long curly sideburn looking things, and they're called payas. So Hasidim generally have less economic success than the rest of the population, other Jews included, and because of how they look and how they sort of intentionally self-segregate, they're fairly easily identifiable by anti-Semites, and there's definitely been cases of Hasidic and Haredi Jews being targeted. And just as sort of an aside, Haredi is a broader designation that includes, other quote unquote ultra-orthodox Jews. So all Hasidim are Haredi, but not all Haredi are Hasidim.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so as I was saying, they practice, sort of like self-seclusion from secular society to varying degrees based on the sect. But even the most outward-facing groups like Chabad Lubavitch, who they're really famous for their outreach to less religious Jews, and this is called Kielhuf. They generally keep some distance from the secular world and the non-Jewish world. Obviously, this is really, really simplistic and glosses over a lot of really interesting things to learn about Hasidim and Hasidism. But, it gives you all the most basic background knowledge you'd need for the rest of the episode of this podcast.
Yeah, and this sort of idea, this insular society and community will come into play several times within the series. So, all right. So, what about? I mean, you seem to be really well versed within these portrayals. What about how they've been portrayed in the media in the past? I mean, if they're not really involved with creating or consuming media from the outside world, this minority within a minority, and basically it's people who aren't part of this community are, tasked with making content about them. Then it seems like it could be kind of problematic at times, especially if they're kind of intentionally different from broader society.
So I actually just got done reading a review of Shina Hammerman's book of Hasidim and film that I saw in the journal Jewish Film and New Media. So a lot of what she saw was their portrayal as something opposite whatever the other characters are, and that could be, in one case it was cowboys, in another case it was Muslims or Frenchmen or whatever, and their clothing often identifies their role as other, so to speak. There was another study showing how Israeli radio hosts were stereotyping Haredi Jews. So, among other things, and this is going to be very relevant to this show, a common theme was that they were seen as quote-unquote shady businessmen. During COVID, another study found that the Israeli media showed these groups as having a positive impact towards curbing the virus's spread. And I think an article I saw by Stephanie Knaus that reviewed and compared the shows Cecil and Unorthodox, this was really good at highlighting the various ways that Hasidim have been portrayed in the modern media. So while Cecil shows them in a more sympathetic and humanizing way without pretending that there aren't differences between them and the non-Hasidic world, Unorthodox paints a picture of stark contrast between the rest of the world and this oppressive religious group with a theme of liberation upon leaving them, which is that was the creators of the show's experience, and I don't mean to detract from that. They're certainly a more closed off and conservative group of people, but regardless of what's true and what's not, Unorthodox does not paint them in a positive light. So I also think that this is really relevant to what we're about to get into here, since Rough Diamonds it's another modern TV show about this group of people. And now that we've sort of set the stage for what we might expect, could you get into how we analyzed Rough Diamonds?
Yeah. So we did, as you know, Trey, we did a thematic analysis of the show. So more specifically, we were looking at how the show portrays Hasidism. So that's really what we sort of looked at within the show. After looking at the literature showing how they've been treated in the media in the past, we kind of developed an idea of what to look for. So, for example, they are heavily ostracized, or are they heavily ostracized, or how do they interact with people outside their group? Another thing we wanted to look out for is how the family is portrayed in relation to crime or other shady business dealings, because it is obviously a crime show. So And of course that other article that Trey had mentioned, or that Trey had mentioned earlier. So, all right, so back at it. Keeping other studies in mind, we came at this from an inductive approach. Inductive here means that we weren't going in with a theory or any sort of strong framework for what we expected to find. So we just looked at the show. I myself just went in blind and allowed the themes to kind of come to us. So there were 8 episodes, around 45 minutes to an hour each. I took the first 4, took notes and saw looked for themes that kind of came up, and then Trey, handled the episodes 5 through 8. After taking notes for each episode, we did your standard coded through them, and developed the themes from those codes. So Trey, do you mind kind of explaining the themes that we found?
For sure. So the first is the sacred and the profane, and this just sort of details when the show engages more directly with any sort of religious content. So it could be one of the characters at shul, or praying or anything like that. It's engagement with religion, and then Noah, who has left the community, and he's one of the main characters, and is living a secular life, sort of how that engages itself with the religious aspect of the community. The second is the proximity to crime, or one's willingness to do crime, and this just sort of goes into whenever the show highlights the criminal or shady aspect of what the family gets up to. The third was the influence of women. So a lot of times women in these communities are seen as marginalized and not having a significant amount of influence, but this show has numerous portrayals of women being in positions of power and influence.
Yeah.
And then the last one we saw was family, and that one's fairly self-explanatory. The show revolves around a family, and so this theme was simply about how family is portrayed in the show. I think that kind of covers it for now. So Alex, if you want to start us off with episode 1.
Yeah, all right. So just kind of moving along here. Episode 1, first opening scene, we see Noah, who again Trey just mentioned, basically represents the profane in that first theme, and Noah. For those of you who've seen the show, sort of is this character who left the family, came back, but he's very, very much goes against what is traditionally known to be or accepted as a traditional Jewish Hasidic Jew, where he's very much the aggressor at times, isn't afraid to sort of stand up for himself, which tends to sort of subvert this Jews are weak stereotype that we often see in the media. So yeah, that initial scene is Noah basically kind of getting in a little bit of an argument with airport people. He sort of establishes his authority, is able to kind of move on. So another theme that was sort of very present in that first episode was family. Again, it's a first episode, so we are introduced to the Wolfson family, and along with the other Jewish families within this diamond mining community in Antwerp. There's a lot of scenes revolving around dinner and sort of the family gathering. And again, spoiler alert, there's a death in the family, in which sort of brings these people together. Another strong theme, this episode 1, which I think falls, we're using it under family, but it's very strong sense of community. So everyone within this, within the Wolfen for sure, they sort of rely on each other. So it's definitely one of those instances where it takes a village to sort of kind of for everyone to sort of rise up. So, and as Trey mentioned, very insular community. So they sort of only deal within with other people within their own community. All right, so yeah, and we'll go ahead and play a little bit of a little snippet of the show episode 1 here, where basically just shows Noah to be this image of that subverts the stereotypical Jews are weak trope. So if you want to play that,
yeah, for sure.
I advise you to say thanks and leave us alone. Fuck you. We've got a deal? Dirty Jew.
So yeah, as you guys heard audio there, that was basically Noah kind of coming in and taking care of business, so to speak, where the bookies were sort of hassling the family, and Noah kind of stepped in as the aggressor and kind of handled it. So again, going against this that stereotype of the Jewish people just generally being weak. So all right, so moving on to episode 2. Okay, so again, episode 2, moving right along here. So again, a major theme that we sort of played around with that was very crucial in this episode was the sacred and the profane, and we have a clip for everyone here to listen to. Basically talks about this very insular community that is this Hasidic Jew diamond trading community. So we'll go ahead and just play the clip now.
I hope for your sake the ones behind it aren't Jews.
What for?
Well, because Jews are not snitches. Since their morals are strong. What? They don't talk to the authorities. They have their own systems in place.
Well, Dad, maybe that's true, but we do too.
Oh, yeah?
So yeah, that clip basically, one of the characters, their father, is talking about how these this Jewish community have their long established traditions and systems that rely heavily on these secrets. So again, this sacred and the profane kind of coming into play there. So.
Yeah, if I can jump in too, I also think this sort of shows the theme of their proximity to crime, because the backdrop of this clip is this woman involved with the police talking to her father about the situation, and the father, that's why he says Jews don't snitch, because she's trying to get information about this community. So I think it's sort of like a dual theme, the sacred and the profane, and then the proximity to crime. But I'll hand it back over to you, Alex.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more there. And both of these themes do kind of play a major role within the show. So, all right, so moving on right along here, episode 3. Really, all of the themes were kind of touched in this episode here. But I would say just for purposes of the podcast, we'll sort of focus a lot more on the family for this episode. So there's scenes where you can kind of see there's Noah's son Tom helping his grandfather with the baskets, and there's a very touching scene between Tom, the grandson, and the grandfather, again showing this this community that's very rooted within family. Family is very important to them, obviously. And we also see, aside from that, we also see, proximity to crime being played around with. We don't have a clip for this episode, but one of the main characters, Eli, he kind of has to deal with this, whether to kind of go against the family, go against this Jewish tradition of no snitching, because he's possibly is going to start working with the police, possibly. So again, episode 3, major themes, family, with this interaction between Noah, his son, and his Hasidic family, and again, this proximity to crime and sacred and profane, with this sort of moral dilemma that Eli has to constantly struggle with, really throughout the series. Okay, so again, just moving along here, episode 4, really major themes here. Again, sacred and the profane, family, proximity to crime. We do have a clip for everyone here that basically just sort of shows this sort of insularity within the community, and the clip is Eli speaking to another character within the show, Fogel, and they're talking about this importance to sort of stay within the Jewish people here.
That it was wrong to side with the Goyim. And I have nothing against them, but they're not our community. And it seems clear to me that in times like these, we have to unite, help each other. Lately, traders have put...
So yeah, as you guys just heard, so that was Eli basically talking to Fogel and sort of trying to convince him to sort of accept a deal there, and sort of citing this Jewish community and as part of why he should accept. Another major theme, and I think the first time we've talked about this, is the influence of women plays a major role here in this episode. This is spoiler alert, everything just sort of is kind of going downhill here, and Adina, sort of the big sister of the family here, kind of interjects and establishes her role within the family as and she's definitely seen as competent, versus Eli, who's the eldest, is definitely seen as more bumbling of the siblings. So again, that was one of the first instances where this influence of women comes into play and is pretty crucial to the narrative there. And again, this idea that family and the sacred and the profane, kind of this interplay between them, with Eli attempting to do his business with Fogel. So I think episode 5 here, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Trey.
Okay. Yeah, so moving on to episode 5, a couple of the themes we saw in here, starting off the sacred and the profane again. Noah is talking to someone in the Diamond District who says that a family member's died, and Noah says, "May his memory be a blessing," which is traditionally what Jews say upon the mention of the dead. It's sort of a Jewish version of rest in peace. Again, we have in the next scene, we have Hasidim interacting with visibly Gentile women as equals in business. So that plays into the influence of women. And finally, we have the proximity to crime, in which Ellie is working along with the police, and they have him wired up, and he gets sent to talk to his accountant to send money to some clandestine shell account that a lot of people in the diamond trade have in Tel Aviv. And that sort of wraps up for episode 5. Episode 6, we have... All right, and so like I said, moving on to episode 6, at the beginning we have Adina and Noah meeting with these guys in the Albanian mafia, and she plays a very large role in speaking to them. So again, we have the influence of women, the powerful Hasidic woman. Moving on to another theme, we have Gila, who who Noah was involved with when he was still a part of the community, they have relations, and she asks Noah about his tattoo, which is, as I'm sure the audience knows, forbidden by Jewish law to get tattooed. And he mentions that he only got it because it was forbidden. It was an act of rebellion against his former life. So again, going into the sacred and the profane. And towards the end of the episode, one of the Albanians goes and scares Tommy while he's at school. So Noah comes and speaks to him and makes sure he's taken care of. And this shows both the proximity to crime theme as well as the family theme, because Noah's obviously so concerned about Tommy's safety, his son. He had to leave Gila's place to go there. So this sort of gets into that. Now moving on to episode 7. So at the beginning of this episode, we have Gila, who, as previously mentioned, is currently romantically involved with Noah again, but she's also engaged to a Hasidic man who wants to move her out to New York City named Yehuda. And he calls and tells her about how he's prepping to move to New York and getting everything ready for the marriage. But Gila's still clearly unsure because her feelings for Tommy have come back, or her feelings for Noah have come back since Noah's come back. And moving on, we have Eliyahu, who's at shul, or synagogue, and he's talking to someone at the synagogue about getting tickets for Rosh Hashanah. And the man asks him if he wants his father's siddur, his prayer book. And Ellie doesn't feel worthy of it. So this is showing the family dynamic here and the family theme. And finally, towards the end of the episode, Ellie begins praying while he's underwater, whilst he's thinking about all of the issues that the family are facing right now. So this involves both the family and the sacred and the profane theme. And finally, moving on to episode 8, we found 2 major themes in this. The first is they're interrogating a member of the community who they need to get something from, and Adina is a big part of this interrogation. And this shows both their proximity to crime because they're blackmailing him, and Adina's influence, again showing the influence of women. So Alex, if you could go ahead and play that clip real quick.
Yeah, justice for Benny here.
First of all, it is almost Yom Kippur. Therefore, we need to atone for how we all behaved toward you this year. You did wrong, yes, but we have to give you an opportunity to explain yourself a bit, Benny. After all, we're still family.
You're apologizing to me, right?
You get the prosecutor on the phone, or everyone's gonna find.
So yeah, again showing this mix of themes and Adina's continued prominence in the show, going against the grain and the traditional idea of the Hasidic woman is docile and out of sight. And finally, at the very end of the episode, we have Noah and Tommy praying at shul after Noah's taken their father's seat in the synagogue. And this shows his complete reintegration into the family. It shows the sacred and the profane theme. And it just sort of wraps up the show very, very well. So just sort of, wrapping up for the show. I think the themes we found were overall pretty positive. It shows the importance of family. And I think with the crime aspect, yes, that could be seen as negative, but I feel like it's more so used to show that this group of people can be tough. Again, it goes against this, these unfortunate stereotypes of Jews as victims or as weak. and it shows the importance of the religious traditions of the family. There's so many scenes in the shul, or they're praying, or this or that, and it shows the prominence of women and shows how powerful women in this community can be. Again, going against stereotypes.
Yeah, and I think the show did a really good job of also just humanizing this group of people. Oftentimes, this insular community can be seen as a little bit maybe off-putting to people who don't really know a lot about them. So, just this, although not the most perfect show, I think it did a really good job at just showing this community. These people are also they can be vulnerable, and it humanizes them very well throughout the show.
Yeah, it gives overall, I think we will think a pretty positive portrayal, but it's multifaceted, and again goes against a lot of stereotypes. While insularity is a stereotype of this community, it isn't always necessarily portrayed as negative in this show. So yeah, it portrays this group of people as complex and having a lot going on instead of this sort of monolith, right? Would you say that's a good place to end on?
I think so, Trey. We've been at it for a bit.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for listening, and we hope you learned a lot. And check out the description for our sources. Thank you.
Thank you all.